All right, welcome to another deep dive. This one is, well, let's just say this one's a doozy.
Oh, is it ever?
We're going deep on Marvin Gray today. And, yeah, he was a serial killer.
He was indeed.
But that's not even the crazy part of the story. The guy was also like a seriously strong power lifter.
Almost superhuman strength, some would say.
We're talking close to breaking world records while he was in prison.
It's a fascinating paradox, to say the least.
Yeah, no kidding. Our main source for this deep dive is excerpts from Gray's Wikipedia article. And trust me, folks, this one's a wild ride. So to kick things off, let's set the stage.
Okay, so picture rural Kentucky, 1954.
Okay.
Marvin Gray is born to a large family, one of 10 children. Life was tough from the get-go. But there's a detail here that always struck me.
Lay it on me.
As a child, he was prescribed medication for panic attacks.
Panic attacks, wow.
And the medication, well, it contained methamphetamines.
Whoa, wait, seriously, methamphetamines back then? For a kid?
It's hard to fathom now, but it was a different time. And the long-term effects of that kind of early exposure, well, they can be devastating, especially for a developing brain.
Yeah, that's got to leave a mark. I mean, talk about a rough start.
Absolutely. And then tragedy struck again. In 1965, when Gray was just 11 years old, his father died.
Oh, man.
A sudden heart attack.
That's awful. Losing a parent at that age, I can't even imagine.
It seems to have been a turning point for young Marvin, a shift in his behavior.
Yeah, it's like his childhood got ripped away. Suddenly he's thrust into this world of adult responsibilities and the pressure.
Yeah.
Well, it's no surprise he started acting out.
His first arrest was at age 12.
12 years old. That's heartbreaking.
It was just the beginning. Expelled from school at 13, weapons charges,
Yeah,
robberies.
That's like a rapid downward spiral.
And at age 17, he lands in the castle.
The castle. Okay, I'm intrigued, but also kind of scared. What is the castle?
It was a notoriously tough Kentucky prison, known for its brutal conditions, overcrowded, violent.
Sounds like a nightmare.
It was, especially for a young, impressionable guy like Gray. You know, imagine that environment. For someone already struggling, it's less about rehabilitation and more like, well, a crash course in criminality.
Jeez. So the castle.
Mm.
This is where Gray discovers powerlifting. Trying to find some kind of outlet, I guess.
It seems that way. Powerlifting probably gave him a sense of control, mastery, in a place where he felt powerless.
It's a common theme we see, actually, with inmates finding strength, both literally and figuratively, in weightlifting.
Yeah, I can see that. But it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? I mean, power without purpose can be a dangerous thing.
Exactly. And in Gray's case, it became intertwined with his embrace of white supremacy. Another way, perhaps, of seeking belonging and identity in a chaotic, brutal world.
Yeah, a twisted kind of community. It's like he's trying to find strength and purpose in the darkest of places. But okay, so eventually Gray gets out of prison,
1975.
tries to start over in Denver, gets a job even. It's like, okay, maybe this is the turning point. He's going to turn things around. You'd hope so, unfortunately. That's not quite how the story goes.
What happened?
The cycle of violence continued. He got into more trouble with the law. There was even a shooting incident with the police.
Oh, wow.
And then there's the unsolved murder of Joseph Didier.
This is all happening in Denver.
Yep. Gray was a suspect in the Didier case, but never actually convicted.
Well,
Later, evidence emerged linking the gun used in the Didier murder to the one Gray used in that police shooting incident.
wait a minute. So are you saying that Gray may have been involved in a murder even before his time at the castle? That's huge.
It does make you wonder, doesn't it, about the effectiveness of the initial investigation.
Seriously, how many other crimes could have been prevented if things had been handled differently, you know?
It's a chilling thought, and this Didier case, well, it seems to mark a turning point for Gray.
How so?
His crimes escalate. They shift from theft and assault to something much darker, much more sinister.
Yeah, and then there's the prison murder. The escape in 1980 with accomplices. It's like he's on a runaway train at this point.
Yeah.
Heading straight for disaster.
And the escape attempt itself. Well, it ended in violence, too.
Oh no, what happened?
One of Gray's accomplices was found dead, brutally murdered. They found a bloody screwdriver in the getaway van.
A screwdriver? Oh God, that's awful.
The other accomplice, William Perdue, just vanished. No trace. To this day, his fate remains a mystery.
This is getting really dark.
It is, and it's only going to get darker from here. In 1981, Gray commits another murder. This time, the victim is Jolene Sue Gardner.
This is the one where, if I remember correctly, it was particularly brutal. 14 stab wounds, right?
That's right. And the level of violence here, it suggests a deeper psychological disturbance. It's not just about escaping anymore.
No, it feels like the violence itself became the goal.
Like a way of exerting power, control, in a life that's spiraling out of control.
Yeah, that makes sense. So for Gardner's murder, he gets 16 years. But, well, prison doesn't exactly have a great track record for rehabilitation.
Especially not in Gray's case, it actually seems to have had the opposite effect, solidifying his violent tendencies.
Oh, how so? What happened in prison this time?
Well, he was accused of rape while incarcerated, and he never stopped powerlifting. In fact, he became known for his incredible physique.
So it's like this cycle of violence. It just kept feeding itself.
Sadly, yes.
He gets out again in 91. You think, okay, third time's the charm, right?
You'd hope so.
But he violates parole almost immediately. It's like he couldn't function outside the prison walls, almost like he wanted to go back.
It's a fascinating question. Was he institutionalized, unable to cope with the outside world? Or was there something else drawing him back? Whatever it was, he ended up back behind bars in 1992. And this time, it was a life sentence.
And that's when he earned the title of, what was it, the most dangerous prisoner in Colorado?
Exactly. His reputation preceded him.
I bet. I mean, what exactly earned him that reputation? Was it more violence?
There were allegations of assaults, even rapes of fellow inmates. The authorities had to take drastic measures.
Like solitary confinement.
Eventually, yes. He was transferred to a maximum security prison and ultimately placed in solitary.
So at this point, they finally have him contained, isolated. The end of the story, right?
Well, not quite. In 2000, things take a very unexpected turn. Marvin Gray starts confessing.
Confessing to what?
To everything. He claims responsibility for 23 murders.
Whoa, hold on. 23. That's insane.
It was a bombshell, and he doesn't just confess, he goes into detail. Grants an interview to the Denver Post even, describing his alleged crimes. It's like he wants the world to know.
What's the motivation there? Is this like genuine remorse? Or is it something else?
That's the million-dollar question. Why confess after all this time? Is it a need for attention? A twisted desire for infamy? Or something even deeper, even darker? These confessions, they sent shockwaves through the media. And of course, they triggered a massive investigation.
Right, because now they have to figure out, okay, is he telling the truth?
Exactly. And they brought in the polygraph, the lie detector test.
Oh, so what happened? Did he pass?
Initially, the polygraph seemed to support his claims, but then there was a twist.
Of course there was. What happened?
It turned out that the medication Gray was taking at the time could have skewed the results, made them unreliable.
So the polygraph's out the window. Back to square one.
It was a major setback for the investigation, and it just added another layer of ambiguity to an already baffling case. We're left with this puzzle. A man claiming to be a prolific serial killer, but with evidence that's, well, murky at best.
Yeah, it's a tough one to crack. But let's try to unpack it, shall we?
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about the nature of truth and the stories we tell ourselves.
It's like trying to separate fact from fiction, which, in a case this twisted, it's almost impossible. But, okay, let's try to at least, untangle some of these threads.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things Gray confessed to was that that murder of Joseph Didier back in 75. Remember, that's the one where the gun was linked to him, even though he was never convicted.
Right. And his confession, it added some pretty chilling details, stuff that seemed to back up his involvement.
Okay, but what about the other confessions? There were a bunch of them, right?
Oh, yeah. He claimed a whole string of murders after he was released in 78. He said it was because he wanted to control his girlfriend at the time, a woman named Sheila Olsbach. These supposed killings, they spanned multiple states: Nebraska, Tennessee, Iowa, Kentucky, even Illinois.
Whoa, a multi-state killing spree? It's hard to even wrap your head around that.
It is. And then there's William Perdue. Remember him?
The missing accomplice from the prison break.
Yeah. Gray said he killed him too, stabbed him with a screwdriver, dumped the body in a landfill.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
It's just awful. But again, no body, no evidence.
Exactly. And even after that last release in 91, he confessed to more, including the death of Daniel Green, that inmate he was initially accused of killing back in 92. It's a truly horrifying narrative. Decades of violence.
It is. But okay, here's the big question. Is any of it true? Is this a genuine confession from some, tortured soul? Or is it all just a big lie cooked up by a master manipulator?
That is the million-dollar question, and honestly, we may never know for sure, but we have to at least consider the possibility that he was embellishing, maybe even fabricating some of these confessions.
Why would he do that? What's the point of making stuff up?
Well, there's this psychological phenomenon. It's called pseudologia fantastica. Basically, people with this condition, they create these elaborate lies, and often there's no clear motive. It's not about money or anything like that. It's the deception itself, the act of lying.
So you're saying maybe he was crafting a persona,
Yeah.
a dark legend,
Yeah.
to, like, cement his infamy.
Yeah, it's possible, especially in prison. Stories, reputations, they hold a lot of power in that environment. By confessing to all these horrific crimes, he could have been trying to elevate his status, become this figure of fear, of respect, or at least the kind of twisted respect you get in prison.
Okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense. But what about the details? He did give some specific details that seem to line up with unsolved cases.
True, and we can't rule out that at least some of his confessions were genuine. Maybe there was some part of him that needed to unburden himself, to try and find some kind of, I don't know, redemption. Twisted as that might sound.
Yeah, redemption. It's
Yeah.
hard to imagine someone like Marvin Gray seeking redemption.
It is. But the human psyche is a complex thing. And remember, we're talking about a man who spent a huge chunk of his life in prison, a system that can really warp your perception of reality, blur the lines between truth and lies.
And there's the solitary confinement. That can't have helped.
No, absolutely not. Prolonged isolation can have devastating effects on mental health, hallucinations, paranoia. It can even break down your sense of self.
So maybe these confessions, they were a cry for help, a desperate attempt to connect with someone, anyone, to escape that crushing loneliness.
It's a valid theory. Think about it. For someone like Gray, someone who's built a life around violence and aggression, confessing to even more gruesome crimes, that might have been the only way he knew how to get attention, to shake things up, to feel something, anything other than that suffocating emptiness.
That's really sad when you think about it. And we haven't even touched on his diagnosis,
Yeah.
antisocial personality disorder.
Ah, yes. Well, that certainly complicates things.
So how does that play into all this?
Well, antisocial personality disorder, it's marked by a few key traits: disregard for social norms, lack of empathy, and a tendency towards impulsive behavior. People with this disorder, they often have a really distorted sense of morality. They can be manipulative, deceitful, and they don't feel remorse the way most people do.
So it's possible that his confessions, whether true or not, they were driven by a whole mix of factors. A need for attention, a desire for control, the effects of isolation, and then, yeah, the underlying traits of his personality disorder.
Exactly. It's a lot to unpack, and ultimately, we may never have a clear answer. Was he a cold-blooded killer reveling in his own twisted narrative? Or was he a broken man desperately seeking connection in the only way he knew how?
It's a question we'll probably never have a definitive answer to, but I think we've at least, gained some insight into the complexities of this case, and it really highlights how much we still don't understand about the human mind.
It does. Marvin Gray may have died in prison back in 2013, but his story continues to fascinate and disturb, because it forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about ourselves, about human nature.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most captivating stories are the ones that defy simple explanations.
They are. And that even in the darkest corners of the human experience, there's a story waiting to be understood. A story that challenges us to look beyond the surface, to question our assumptions, and to confront our own biases.
Well, folks, that's our deep dive on Marvin Gray, a serial killer, a powerlifter, a master manipulator, or maybe, just maybe, a lost soul searching for a connection in a world that had abandoned him. What do you think? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Head over to our website, check out the source material for yourself, and let's keep the conversation going.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.